She looked me dead in the eyes across that dinner table and said, "It's just one night with my boss, Larry. I'll be back Sunday. You're acting like I'm asking you to bury something. I'm Larry Grazel, and that was the last night I slept under the same roof as my wife." Please, before I continue, kindly share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. I remember the exact weight of the fork in my hand when she said it. Herb roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, the green beans with almonds she always picked around but ate anyway when she thought I wasn't watching. I'd made that meal because it was Tuesday, and Tuesdays used to mean something in our house. Early in the marriage, Tuesdays were the night we cooked together, talked about nothing important, laughed about things that wouldn't make sense to anyone outside of us. Somewhere in the last 2 years, Tuesdays became the night I cooked alone and kept a plate warm for whenever she got home. She'd come in at 9:47. I know because I checked the clock when I heard her key in the lock. The way you check a clock when you've been waiting long enough that time starts to feel personal. She dropped her bag by the door. She didn't ask what was for dinner. She sat down, poured wine before she touched her fork, and looked at me with the expression of someone who'd been rehearsing something in the car. That was the first thing I noticed. The rehearsed look. Trina had to tell. When she was speaking naturally, her eyes moved. When she prepared something, she got very still. She was very still. She told me about the retreat in Savannah. She told me the whole team was going. She said it casually, like it was already established information I'd simply missed. Then she shifted barely and told me Devin had asked her to stay an extra night, privately, to discuss the partnership offer. I put my fork down. I want to be precise about how I felt in that moment, because it wasn't rage. It wasn't even hurt, not yet. It was something colder than both of those things. It was recognition. The same feeling I'd had at 9 years old, standing in the doorway of my parents' bedroom, watching my mother strip the sheets off the bed alone on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after my father stopped coming home. The feeling of a structure you trusted completely revealing the first crack. Not at the surface, but at the base. I asked her if she understood what she was asking me to accept. She said it was one night. She said I knew how hard she'd worked. I didn't know. I had the accounting records, the vendor contracts, the tax filings, and 11 years of quiet evidence to confirm exactly how hard she'd worked. I also had 11 years of knowing who'd been standing behind that work, making sure it didn't collapse. I said, "I know how hard you've worked. I was there for all of it." She looked at me like she was waiting for the explosion. I didn't give it to her. I rinsed my plate. I said goodnight. I went to bed. She slept in the guest room. And while she slept, I made a decision I'd been quietly approaching for longer than that dinner table. I packed while she slept. Not frantically, deliberately. One bag. My grandfather Walter's watch first, before anything else. He'd given it to me at 17 with one instruction. Don't wear it unless you've earned the day. I'd worn it on our wedding day. I'd worn it the day I signed a lease for Trina's first studio. I'd worn it the day the firm landed its first major contract. It had been sitting in its box on my dresser for 14 months straight. I couldn't remember the last day I felt like I'd earned. I took my documents from the fireproof box. My laptop, a photo of my mother, some clothes. That was all. I left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Not as a statement. Not dramatically. I left it because I'd bought it for the woman I married, and that woman hadn't lived here in a long time. I called Kendall from the highway at 5:43 in the morning. He picked up second ring. I said 3 words. "I'm heading your way." He said 4 back. "I'll have the room ready." That was all either of us needed to say. He'd warned me 3 years ago at a cookout, pulled me aside near the grill, said pay attention to what's happening with Trina. I told him she was just excited about the new firm. He'd let it go. He never once said I told you so. Trina called at 6:30 that evening. I watched my phone screen light up from the kitchen table at Kendall's place. Her name's sitting there like a question I already knew the answer to. I let it ring. She called again at 6:44. Again at 7. Again at 7:23. 11 calls before midnight. I turned the phone off after the 11th. I sat in Kendall's guest room that night and didn't feel what people probably imagine you feel when you leave a marriage. I didn't feel liberated. I didn't feel destroyed. I felt the specific quiet of a man who has finally stopped bracing for something. Like a muscle that had been clenched so long it had forgotten what rest felt like and was only now cautiously beginning to remember. On the dresser across from the bed, I'd set Walter's watch face up. I looked at it for a long time before I slept. Tomorrow I would wear it. I would earn the day. I didn't know yet what earning looked like on the other side of 11 years, but I knew it started with sleeping through the night without listening for a key in the lock. I slept straight through until morning. Trina didn't go to Savannah. I didn't know that until much later, but I want to say it here because it matters. She came home that Tuesday night, found the house holding only her presence, and stood in the kitchen for a long time looking at the ring on the counter. Then she saw the empty space on my side of the dresser where Walter's watchbox had sat for 11 years. The ring hadn't broken her. The empty space did. She called her mother first. Dolores's first words were, "Well, maybe this is for the best." Something cracked open in Trina right then. 11 years of her mother's quiet disapproval of Larry. The raised eyebrows when he left engineering for the firm, the comments about Devin building something real for himself, and she heard all of it at once for what it actually was. Poison dressed as concern. She said, "Mama, I don't want to hear from you right now." She hung up. First time in her life, she'd hung up on her mother. Then she called Beverly, my mother, who picked up and didn't say anything for a moment, and then said simply, "Tell me what happened." And Trina sat down on the kitchen floor, the same floor I'd stood on rinsing my plate, and started talking. My mother told me about that call later. She said Trina talked for almost 2 hours, not just about the dinner table, about everything. The slow erosion. The way she'd let Devin's attention feel like value. The way she'd stopped seeing Larry's consistency and started seeing it as furniture, something that was simply there. Beverly listened through all of it. At the end, she said 2 things. She said, "My son loves quietly. That means when he leaves, it's also quiet. Don't mistake the quiet for indifference." Then she said, "There's a sticky note you need to think about." Trina went still on the phone. 14 months earlier, Trina had come home late on a Wednesday. Larry had already eaten. He was at the kitchen table working vendor invoices. She dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, gone upstairs without a word. Not angry, just checked out. In the morning, she'd found a sticky note on the coffee maker. Filters were running low. Pick some up. Hope your week gets easier. She'd read it, moved on, never said thank you. She'd forgotten it completely until Beverly mentioned it. She sat on the kitchen floor after the call ended and stayed there a long time, thinking about every quiet space she'd stopped looking at. There were so many of them. 3 weeks passed. I worked remotely from Kendall's place. I ate at his table. I ran in the mornings through streets I didn't know, which felt right somehow. Movement through unfamiliar territory, no muscle memory pulling me anywhere. I wore Walter's watch every day. Some days, I earned them more than others, but I was present for all of them, which was more than I could say for the last stretch of my marriage. Kendall never pushed me to go back, never pushed me to stay gone. He just kept the refrigerator stocked and the conversations light when light was what I needed and quiet when quiet was what I needed. He was the best kind of brother, the kind who understood that presence wasn't the same as pressure. I thought about Trina. Of course I did. I thought about the woman she'd been when I first met her. Sharp, funny, fiercely proud in a way that wasn't arrogant, just certain. I thought about the folding table in the second bedroom where we'd built the business plan together at midnight, splitting a pizza, arguing about projected margins, laughing about how serious we were taking something that might fail completely. It hadn't failed. We built something real. Both of us. I just needed her to know that before I could come back to it. She didn't call first. She drove 5 hours. I heard Kendall open the front door. Heard a voice I knew better than my own. Heard Kendall say quietly, "I'll give you some space," and his boots on the hardwood heading toward the back of the house. I came to the doorway. She was standing on the porch. 5 hours of highway, and she hadn't fixed her eyes before she knocked. They were red at the edges, the way eyes get when someone has been holding something back for a long time and then stopped holding it all at once in the car. She didn't ask to come in. She just stood there and let it come out. Not just the Devin situation. Everything. The slow erasure of how she'd stopped seeing me. The way she'd let someone else's pursuit feel like excitement when she had a man at home who had quietly given her everything. She said, "I didn't sleep with him. I want you to know that. But I also want you to know that doesn't make me innocent." I did something wrong. I did it at that dinner table. I stepped aside. She came in. We sat at Kendall's kitchen table. And for the first time in longer than I could measure, we talked like we meant it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She set it on the table between us. I recognized it before I even unfolded it. The header, the formatting, the precise structural logic of a man who'd learned to build things that held other things up. It was the original business plan, time-stamped, written in my handwriting. She said, I went back through the share drive after you left. I found everything. The vendor contracts, the tax records, the intake process you built from scratch. She looked at the document, not at me. I've spent 4 years telling the story of how I built something alone, and I never once told the Rayal's story. I said, why didn't you? She thought about it honestly. Then she said, because being the woman who built something alone made me powerful. Admitting I needed you made me grateful. And I was afraid of what it meant to need someone that much. I looked at her for a long time. Then I said the thing I most needed her to hear and most needed to say out loud myself. Needing someone isn't weakness, Trina. It's the whole point. She pressed her lips together. Not at once. The way you nod when something lands in a place words can't quite follow. I forgave her that afternoon. I want to be clear about that, because forgiveness gets misread sometimes. People hear it and think it means everything goes back to what it was. It doesn't work that way. Forgiveness is not a reset. It's a door. You still have to walk through it together, and the walking is the hard part. I told her, I forgive you fully, but forgiveness doesn't mean the same arrangement. We have to rebuild this honestly from the beginning. She said, tell me where to start. I said, start by understanding that I'm not the backup plan. I'm not the man you return to when the excitement runs out. I'm the man you choose. Every single day. The way I chose you. She said, I know that now. I said, I need you to know it before the excitement shows up again. Because it will. She reached across the table. Cover my hand with hers. She said, I'm choosing you right now. Not because you're familiar. Not because you're safe. Because you're the only person who has ever loved me in a way that didn't need an audience. Outside, I could hear Kendall in the backyard pretending to do something that needed doing. I almost smiled. Almost. We went to counseling. 12 sessions with a woman named Dr. Faye Hollister in a quiet office off Peachtree, who had the specific gift of asking the question you'd been avoiding and making it feel like an invitation rather than an accusation. In session 4, Dr. Hollister asked me what I needed from Trina that I hadn't asked for. I sat with that question longer than I expected to. Then I said, to be seen doing it, not credited publicly, just seen by her. Trina said, without hesitating, I saw you. I just stopped looking. That was the most honest thing said in that room across all 12 sessions. Dr. Hollister wrote nothing down when Trina said it. Some things don't need notes. We moved into a different house. New walls, new beginning. Not erasing the history, but refusing to be haunted by the geography of it. We took a trip to New Orleans for our 12th anniversary that actually felt like a celebration instead of a performance. We ate well. We walked slowly. We talked about everything and nothing the way we used to on Tuesdays, before Tuesdays became the night I cooked alone. I wore Walter's watch every day that trip. Every single day. There's something I never told Trina until the last counseling session. On the night I packed, while she slept in the guest room, I sat on the edge of our bed for almost 20 minutes before I stood up and started moving. I wasn't deciding whether to leave. That decision had already been made somewhere quieter and deeper than that moment. I was sitting with the memory of my father, Raymond Grazel, who had rinsed his plate and gone to bed and in the morning was gone. I had spent 30 years being quietly furious at him for leaving without a word, for building a structure and then disappearing from it, for choosing silence as his entire statement. And there I was doing the same thing. The difference, the only difference I could hold on to, was why. My father left because he wanted a different life. I left because I needed Trina to understand what life with me actually was before she made a choice that couldn't be unmade. My leaving was not abandonment. It was the loudest thing a quiet man could say. When I told Trina this in session 12, she cried in the way people cry when they finally understand something they should have understood much earlier. Dr. Hollister handed her the box of tissues and looked at me and said, "That was very brave to share." I said, "It was just the truth." On a Tuesday morning, 14 months after I came home, Trina came downstairs and found a sticky note on the coffee maker. "Filters were running low. Pick some up. Hope you're weak is the good kind." She stood at the counter holding it for a long time. Then she came to find me. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, working. She sat across from me without saying anything, set the note down between us, and looked at me the way she used to look at me on the early Tuesdays, fully, without rehearsal. She said, "I see you doing it." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm not going to stop looking." I closed the laptop. I looked at my wife, at Trina Vance Grazel, who had sat across this same kind of table once and asked me to swallow something I couldn't swallow, and who had driven 5 hours without calling first to stand on a porch and let the truth finally come out of her. And I believed her. Walter's watch was on my wrist. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday. I had earned it.